But the main purpose of today, obviously, I'm going to be running through the MTD Quarterly Filer. We'll take a look at how TaxCalc deals with the quarterly submissions. We may have a little bit, I'm conscious, if anybody was around last week, you'll have seen my device has a few technical issues going on at the moment. I am going to be going away shortly, so it'll be getting updated and fixed then. So there may be a slight pause at one particular point, just while I get a little bit of an issue with my laptop there. But if that does happen, I'll try and fill in the conversation with a bit in the chat. But the bit I'm going to be looking at today is going to be this MTD Quarterly Filer. So I want to take you through how this looks in TaxCalc, how we're handling the submissions, and the bridging solution that we have available. So I suppose that is the first point to mention. It is going to be a bridging solution that TaxCalc have in there. It's not going to be the equivalent of what you might see for bookkeeping providers elsewhere. It'll be very much a quick, easy spreadsheet upload submission, making sure we've got the most effective way possible to get that information to HMRC. Just with people joining as well, there won't be any notes going through or an outtake of notes on the session, but if you guys, because you have the meeting link, if you rejoin the meeting at any time afterwards, follow the link, the session will just play on repeat as we go through afterwards. So if you rejoin at a later time, you'll be able to rewatch the session as and when you want to as well. So diving into our MTD Quarterly Filer, I'm going to open this up, and the example client I'm going to use for this session is going to be Ian Simpson. So I'm going to click in and just open up a tax period for this individual. So if I dive into that, now I'm just going to be demonstrating the 5th of April 2026 tax year for MTD. Appreciate this was the beta phase. As you guys get things up and running over the next couple of months, start to produce everything for your clients, it will obviously be the April 2027 tax year. You'll be able to get that in just by hitting the new tax year button, choosing 5th of April 2027. But if I just double click and open this one up, so this will take me into the Quarterly Filer details for Mr. Ian Simpson. And this is where we'll see the lovely loading speeds on my laptop at the moment. So the first thing I want to note is we don't have to just remember everything you see from this one webinar today. You don't have to pick up on everything that I've said and just take that as gospel forever. Into this little introduction heading, you will always have a nice little 3-minute video that you can refer back to at any point. So this will take you through the key details of how to upload your spreadsheet, how to handle the submission, and some of the key data points for checkpoints, where to view those submissions afterwards, for example, in the MTD Quarterly Filer. So it won't be a very long video, just covers off the essentials, covers off the basics, but it's enough to come back to as a refresher, as and when you get to your first couple of clients that you might be dealing with in, say, 3 months' time on there. But in this business information page underneath, this is going to link all the separate businesses that you have added in your client record for that particular individual. Now, here for Ian Simpson, in my TaxCalc client record, I have added 3 businesses. I've got Simpson's Motors, I've got UK Property, and I've got a second business down there as well. And you see that I've got 2 of these connected to HMRC. So using this link, this little link business button, you're able to log in through your agent services account. And as long as you're authorized to act on their behalf for MTD, you can simply confirm the client details through your agent services account, and then you'll have this connected business ID pulling through, just showing that you've got them connected to HMRC on there as well. It's also important to note the type of business in there as well. So when you're setting up your clients in the practice management section of TaxCalc there, when you're adding these additional businesses in, it will ask your type of business. You'll have a choice in there of self-employment, UK property, or foreign property. The submission categories that you'll have, the detailed breakdowns you'll be able to give to HMRC, will differ ever so slightly based on which option you choose. So just make sure the type of business you're selecting is categorized correctly. This will obviously have a little bit of an impact. So if you think about the end of year tax return as well, there'll be a really nice fetch function I'll be able to talk about later on as well that will basically work off the type of business that you're submitting. But in here, if I wanted to add a different type of business in, it's very, very simple. In Practice Manager, if I just launch and open this up, I can find, can you tell what football team I support? I can find Mr. Ian Simpson. If we give it a nice little, there we go. Under this little business heading, I'm then able to add new different businesses into here. If I was to go into Simpson's Motors, for example, as well, just to kind of see the background, what information we hold in here. Business name, the type is now locked in as self-employment for this one because I've started producing accounts and I've linked this to MTD as well. Something you will have to pop in there just so HMRC are aware of it, the accounting type, the basis of which you're accounting, is it cash or accruals in there? You know, any trading dates if it's separate to the 5th of April year end. and also the address that you're going to be using for that particular business as well. Now, the one bit that's going to be missing from here, which we'll choose in the MTD Quarterly Filer option just afterwards, is going to be whether we're submitting this on a standard basis, so to the 5th of the month, or if we're submitting this on a calendar basis. So if you're going for the end of March, end of June, end of September, end of December as your submission points. So we'll choose that from within the Quarterly Filer itself, but all the other business information, you'll just add that from within the practice management module, add that as details about the business on the individual's client record. If I just close us back out of Ever, and I'll pop us back into the MTD Quarterly Filer, we'll see that information pulling through into here if I go into the breakdown of Simpsons Motors. So I'll see if it's a self-employed business. I've got the address. In this case, we'd had it in without saving an accounting type in there. So I should really get that updated and save in cash or accruals. But I'll also see the quarterly period type. I've got this one set to calendar currently, but we can set that to either standard or calendar basis. If you don't choose a standard setting for any of these businesses, it will just default to the standard option on there for you when you go into the submission. But I can repeat this for each of my separate businesses on here. So once I'm happy that I've got them all in, all up to date, all correct and connected, I can then move on to the quarterly statuses page underneath. And this is almost just going to be an overview page for these particular businesses. So for this client, I'm looking in and I can see Simpsons Motors. I can see we've got an obligation that's been fulfilled earlier in the year. We're now overdue on a couple of these items. And we're now into that final month where this one's going to be approaching. This one's now going to be due for submission for this final quarter in there as well. So in terms of MTD and how we're coping, we're currently off to a bad start with a few things being overdue for Ian Simpson here. But I can see this for each of the different businesses on there too. So I can see whether I've fulfilled my obligations for Simpsons Motors, for the UK property, and had it been connected, that second business item down on the bottom as well. The last little bit we'll point out on there is also just whether or not it was submitted through TaxCalc. So if it was submitted through TaxCalc, you'll just see the plain box. There'll be nothing entered into there. If it was submitted elsewhere, so you might take on a client partway through a year, for example, but was maybe doing their own bookkeeping, you've then moved on to TaxCalc for easier keeping. You'll have a little check if it was submitted elsewhere. It's intended to be there as a good use of records. If you're tracking back and trying to find items later on, you can see clearly it would have been submitted elsewhere. The records won't necessarily be in TaxCalc. You can spot then at that point, you might be looking in the bookkeeping system. You might need to ask your client, or it might be with a previous accountant where that was from as well. So really good little overview page there. It's just going to take you through everything for each of those different businesses. And we can come back to this page after submission as well, because after you've submitted a couple of your spreadsheets, you might want to come back and just confirm you've definitely submitted for every business if people have got multiple businesses, multiple entities to submit for as well. I can see that one in the chat, Sasha. I'll pick up on a couple of the questions in just a moment as well. The session is recorded. It's not going to send out directly afterwards, but if you refollow the link afterwards at any point, when you rejoin the session after it's all finished, effectively it will just play on repeat, play on record, so you'll be able to come back at any time and rewatch it. Into the data submission section. So this is where we're actually going to go and create and upload our spreadsheets. Now, before I go through and do this, I think it'd be handy to take a look at the default example template spreadsheet that we've got on our side. So you do not have to use our template spreadsheet. I'll point out as we go through the mapping very shortly. But if you did want to use the TaxCalc default, if I just open this up, what you'll now see on screen is, well, it's our template. So we start off with a nice little information page. So if you guys want to download this from our website, I'll be able to pop a link into the chat so you can have a download, have a look at it, see what it looks like. If you wanted to take this and white label it, use it for yourselves, absolutely feel free to do so. We've added in a totals page. Now, all these cells locked in yellow are the totals that you would calculate based on the entries we'll put in the following pages. But these also, we've locked them in. So as much as I tried to click into that, it can't be impacted. So if you wanted to provide this to your client as a way of going through, adding details in, getting to a nice income and expenditure account there that you can then map up as part of the import process, you can do this with the knowledge that they're not going to be able to break the formulas, not going to be able to kind of skew this spreadsheet in any way that's too far from the default in there. Now, the way we'll populate this up is within each individual transactions page. So sales transactions in here, we can go through, enter any details of the values we want to put in, obviously customer details, descriptions of a transaction. But the key bits for us here are going to be the quarterly filing analysis. So that's the equivalent of, say, an account code or nominal that you're going to be applying. Which category do you want this to appear in on the submission to HMRC? and an amount column on the right-hand side there as well. So this is the value it's obviously going to be grouping together to come to the total on that quarterly filing totals page. So obviously this would accumulate, it would add up the 500, the 300, the 200, and 100. We should hopefully see 1100 is the turnover total on that front page. Same principle for purchase transactions. The only thing you'll notice on here is that there is a few more options on the purchase side, the expense side. There's a bit more breakdown of just turnover and other income. Obviously, depending on who you're submitting for, depending on their turnover level, it's optional as to whether or not you need to give all that level of breakdown on there as well. And the final bit we've put in, this is just a data selection to pre-populate those items, make sure you've got those available in the drop down. We've included the actual income and expense analysis codes as they appear on the HMRC submission as well. So this could just be a really nice little template to use, a really nice way to work forward, and just make sure you're getting everything included on there. And like I say, if you wanted to white label this and provide it to your clients, knowing it's sort of a fixed template, it's hard to be broken, the formulas are locked in place, it could be a really good option to have there as well. But if I just close this down, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and actually import this into the system. So I'm going to hit create new update on here. And it'll take us through to a page where I can add and upload the spreadsheet. Now this is where I know fine well, just from previous examples, I've had a little bit of a loading issue on my laptop. So I'll take a look into the chat and the questions while this is going in to make sure we cover everything off as well. And if I choose my file, and I'm going to upload my MTD spreadsheet in it. So just coming into these, so I can see one. So from Jed, I would double check on that one. I'm not sure off the top of my head exactly what you should be going for. I would suggest checking in with HMRC for how they want that to go through. I know there's a little bit of kind of grace at the moment on how we're treating the quarterly filings and how that goes through. My instinct would be to say that if it's going to be accruals come the end of the year, to follow accruals throughout the period as well and pop everything through the same way. But yeah, I would just double check how they expect that to be treated. If it's going to be separate treatments for quarterly and end of year filing. And Alison, on that one, if invoices are owed but not paid, which ones do you submit? It entirely depends on which basis you're submitting on. If you're submitting on an accruals basis, I would still pop the invoice values in there. If you're submitting on a cash basis, I would just include what comes through from the bank statements, that sort of thing as well, and just making sure all that gets included. And if I toggle over to some of the questions. So on the questions bit, so Satish, do we need to register clients for MTD? Absolutely. So the clients do need to be registered. Officially, it was the 6th of April when they should have been registered by. I do know there is a soft landing period currently with HMRC. I believe there was something mentioned about December is when penalties and stuff will be starting on there. Classic advice would just be to get it done as soon as possible. The sooner the better. Make sure that everybody's set up and ready to go from there as well. You can see one from Claire, is there a version of a template to allow for VAT? I believe that was the intention. I don't think there is one out there currently. It'll be very easy if you want to. You'll be able to amend our template to put things like gross, net, VAT columns in there if you wanted to as well. I can see one from Kathy, almost just covered that one a moment ago. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head as to whether it should be the same basis right the way through. I believe consistency is probably the best way forward on that one, but I would double check on HMRC's side as to exactly how they're intending to see that coming through. There we go, nice little loading problems on my side. It is making its way in. So I can see one there from Anurada as well. If a client has self-employment and property businesses, it'll be a separate spreadsheet you'd produce for each one. So you have self-employment spreadsheet for that source of income, a property spreadsheet for that source of income. If they have foreign properties, that'll be a separate source again that you'd have to produce in there for. So you might find with a lot of clients, you may be producing 2 spreadsheets in there, potentially 3 or more. For the majority of clients doing this, it'd just be, the one for self-employment. But certainly where property is involved, there will be a separate spreadsheet available for that one as well. And I can see one from Darren there. Does it sync with HMRC for clients submitting their own rental returns? Yeah, it absolutely will. So the way this works, if your client was submitting their own rental and you were submitting the self-employment, as long as you've got their rental details in and connected through TaxCalc, you would be able to see that it was submitted elsewhere. You just have a little check in the separate, you'd have a little check in a non-TaxCalc filing box. So you'd be able to see that the client submitted it elsewhere, basically. Perfect. So I will dive back into the chat and into these messages as we go through as well. I appreciate we've got quite a few people in, so I'll be able to come back and make sure I try and get to as many of these as we go. But in here, obviously, the different options on this page, this will depend on your client's turnover size. So the type of spreadsheet you produce might be different if you're working with high turnover clients or low turnover clients. And that's going to be what we choose here. So summarized data for a single total for expenses, that's going to be people typically with income beneath 90K. That'll be your short form equivalent of what you were doing on the self-assessment tax return. And the detailed breakdown on here for higher income clients, anybody with turnover that goes above 90K in total. For those guys, you'll have to give a breakdown of each different expense category in there. So that'll be your separate sort of car, van and travel, your separate repair stuff, that sort of thing in there too. Now, the one bit that's worth pointing out here, and one of the possibly biggest bits to note about MTD as a whole here as well, is that your submissions will be cumulative submissions. It's not going to be you just submit April to June and then July to September. It's going to be a case of you submit April to June, then you submit April to September, then April to December, and everything on there as well. So what I'd probably expect is you might be using the same spreadsheet and just adding to it as you go rather than lots of separate ones. For that reason, I would recommend ticking to save a copy of the spreadsheet. It means you'll always be able to come back and have a reference point of what that spreadsheet looked like at the time of submission, rather than having to trace through historical versions and working out what it might have looked like from a history file on your current spreadsheet. So would absolutely recommend ticking this option on there. But once everything's in, I'm going to go to the next page. And this is now presenting to me the actual spreadsheet that I just sort of opened up and saw with you guys just a moment ago. So I'll be able to go through, I can see the quarterly filing totals page. I can see those values on here, sales transactions. I'll be able to click in and take a look at all the individual sales transactions on here as well. But for me, the big part of what I'm going to be doing now, there we go, I've just broken my laptop again. But the big part of what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be mapping these amounts over into the submission data on the right-hand side there. So we'll give us a moment to think about it. While it's going through and just doing that, I'll have a look. Yeah. So I can see one from Alison around the 4 quarters and the adjustments. It depends entirely how you want to do it. If you have trial balances and information you've produced in, say, an accounts function, you could absolutely still do that the normal way and just kind of show the final figures as an adjustment from where you were. But there will be an import option to pull through MTD only information on TaxCalc as well, which I'll cover off very shortly. But in here, what we'll see, essentially all these values are in. Now, my screen is going to jump to the right just ever so slightly on this, just because I'm on my laptop screen currently, so it condenses it down. But if I go turnover here, it's going to work on a drag and drop style system where I just say that this turnover box, and they say that comes from there. My other income box comes from there. And now I can cheat. You'll notice we've got this in exactly the same order on our spreadsheet as how it appears on this right-hand side. And on here, I can say cost of goods sold comes from there, payments to subcontractors, and so on. And very simple, just drag and drop style system to get everything popped in. Now, it may be if you're not using our template, you might be using the client's. They may have given you 2 codes that both map to the same section. So if the client's got 2 in a row that both needed to go to wages and staff costs, for example, there's nothing to stop me selecting that again and choosing the one underneath it. I'd see them separately with an accumulated total at the top there as well. Likewise, if that was incorrect, I wanted to take that away, I can always just cross that off. And I could say that was car, van and travel instead. So really flexible in terms of how you want to allocate those. You don't have to do 1 for 1. It does mean if your clients work in a slightly different way, they can use their own spreadsheet, and this can be a really simple mapping process for you as well. But one of the benefits of having consistency across the spreadsheets is if people do use the same spreadsheet template, you only need to set up a mapping template once. And then I could come back and apply a save map. And I would remember all the previous allocations that I had the last time I used it. So in there, I'll have everything allocated already. You see all those codes are pre-populated. I've not had to go and map every individual one. So this would be a one-time exercise when you first set up your spreadsheet, rather than having to do this every single time you upload it in. The last little bit is obviously you may see these add disallowable buttons on here as well. So these little links, if my car, van and travel expenses say was maybe 50% private for this individual, I can pop 50% in there as a private usage amount. If in wages and staff costs, I found that actually Ian over here has just paid £35 to his best mate, it's not technically a business cost, but he didn't know how to categorize it, so it's in the wrong place. I can add a disallowable. I can then switch that to GBP, and I could have a fixed value of £35 in there as well. So it'll give you the flexibility to work either way and make sure you're getting the right disallowables entered for your clients on there. Now, once I'm happy with that, I can see I've got everything mapped up. I've done my disallowables. I'm pretty confident I've got everything included. I'm sure in most cases, there's probably more to include in there as well. I can now save and next. I'll have a blank column somewhere, I'm sure, or something double mapped. I'll just continue and we'll find out what's wrong on this next page. But I had a blank entry for tax taken off. I've not entered anything on that one. So you'll be able to skip over that one. That'll be absolutely fine if necessary. But on here, I can see income, expenses, disallowables, all listed separately side by side. I can see the totals underneath as well. It'll give me a nice sort of income and expenditure style page there, so we can see net loss, any adjusted loss for your disallowables in there as well, and a brief little summary of the key data that's going to HMRC on that side as well. Now, if I got to here and I realized that actually I'd mapped things up incorrectly, I should have had figures in different places, or I've put my figures into the wrong place there, I can always go back to that mapping page. So I can go back and edit where the codes are pulling from. I can edit my disallowables again. You're not stuck when you get to this page. And you can have that ability to go back if you need to. But once I was happy with everything, at this point, I just submit to HMRC and send that away. Now, one thing I'd probably recommend in most cases is you'll see we have a little ability here to send to TaxCalc's e-sign envelope. You'd absolutely be able to do that if you want to. What you might also want to do if you're using something like Engager alongside as well, you may want to save a copy of this document as a PDF just to be able to upload and send that through a client portal through a shared access point elsewhere as well. Before submitting, although I don't believe it's technically required, I would always just make sure that your clients are informed of the figures, make sure they've approved it. I wouldn't want to submit anything to HMRC on a client's behalf without them being aware of what's going on there and approving it in the first instance. So just make sure you are using those options and making sure that you are on top of that as well. But once everything was happy, like say, you can submit to HMRC. That'll just confirm the filing credentials and it'll fire that away into the system. So that's dealt with and handled. If I'm to close back out, I can see this one's now in progress, but if that was submitted, I'd see that change over to fulfilled. So I'd be able to see my adjusted progress on there. But what you'd also see as well, quarterly statuses, would see these update too. So they would go to fulfilled and I'd see that actually I've just got my UK property one left to do. I'll be able to go on and crack on with that one next. So it's always worth just toggling back into quarterly statuses before you finish everything off in TaxCalc there, just to make sure you've definitely not missed a submission, everything's gone away fine, there's no errors returned from HMRC, anything like that. But obviously I can repeat that process for UK property, the second business, whatever different data types and information types I've got in there, whatever submissions I need to do, just repeat that process however many times necessary for that client. The final bit within TaxCalc there is the HMRC tax calculation. So this will pull information back from HMRC based on the year-to-date submission figures that you've put across. All you need to do is hit trigger calculation, and it will start pulling back all the information from HMRC at that point. I do want to stress this is a HMRC tax calculator that's in there. It's not inbuilt, so it may take a little while to sync and open up from HMRC if they're having problems on their side there. But what you should expect to see from that is an estimated tax figure based on your current submissions. It won't be an exact science because you will have further adjustments to make. You'll have capital allowances, things like that to account for. There will be end of year adjustments that are to be taken into account. But it will take your current position for that individual and give you a sort of a ballpark figure of what to expect and give your clients something to work with so they can start setting money aside, understanding what the tax bill may look like come the end of the year. So this would be something if your clients do get in touch partway through and they want that little bit of guidance, what to put aside, what to work with, how much of it should they expect to be paying, you can trigger that calculation and get a return back from HMRC on that one. But the final point of submission through TaxCalc in here would be the end of year submission, that final self-assessment style page. So that fifth submission that you would do. Now, we don't have the final submission released within the product just yet. We'll be expecting to see that within the next couple of months on there. But that final style submission, it will be very akin to the current self-assessment in terms of how it works. But the fetch function that we currently have on our self-assessments at the moment pulls through largely employment-based information. So P60 details, P11D information, that sort of thing it'll pull in. That's also going to be upgraded to include the self-employment information, the rental information, and it will be pulling from those categories that are included on the submissions to HMRC. So that's why that mapping stage, regardless of which system you submit from, is going to be really important, getting the categories correct, because come the end of year, if you wanted to import that directly onto the tax return, you can, but it's going to be crucial, obviously, no matter where you submit from, all that was correct in your quarterly submission, so it's really nice and easy to flow through onto your end of year tax return. But that one, like I say, we'll have that released over the next couple of months. That's something currently being worked on, finalized and getting ready. So that'll be an update coming soon. I'm sure there'll be plenty of demonstrations and run throughs of that one as it happens. I do believe the final submission is working similar to the self-assessment deadlines currently. I would double check that again, but I do believe it's running alongside those. It's not like the quarterly filings where you've got sort of to the 7th of the following month, a little bit like the VAT ones on there. Perfect. But what I'll do then, I'm going to close out TaxCalc here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to Engager just for a final couple of bits and pieces on here, because there's some nice little features on Engager that might help you with the client management piece, the interactions with the clients, especially taking that sort of signature idea, that signature request and how that might appear. So I'm going to just toggle over and get my active clients list up on Engager here. So as you can see, Engager app, I'm on my client list. I hit the control button a few too many times there. I'm on my client list, and to make this easier for myself, I've filtered this down to just individuals on here as well. So I can see straight away all my individuals and sole traders. I'm not going to have limited companies, partnerships, or anything clogging up my client list here. Now, the first bit to note is if I'd filtered this down to just say MTD affected clients, if I needed to tell everybody that they were impacted, or if I hadn't maybe set up my service yet, but I needed to get a quick message out to everybody, tell them to bring some records in. From this client page, I could select any individuals necessary using the tick box feature on the left-hand side, and you can actually compose an email and draft messages straight out from the client's page as well. So I appreciate a lot of people might be doing it already, but it's one, if anybody wasn't aware, really nice, quick, handy tool, that one, just to get quick communications out as and when you need. Certainly, if you do find that you're under pressure, you maybe missed the opportunity for an automated message, and you just need something fast to communicate with those clients. So in there, you can save template emails if you want to. So you might have like an information request template stored in for MTD, but you can also just type directly into the body to chase that up. You can use placeholders for things like client names in there, just to get that out as quick as possible. But thinking specifically of tracking your MTD workflows as well, if I open up Mr. Craig Charlie here, it's just an example to work through. In here, if I go to services and pricing on step 4 of the client workflow, I can turn on an MTD for its service. Now, for anybody who's taken out Engager more recently, there will be an MTD for its service in there by default at the point you took it out. If anybody's a more longer term user, if they've had Engager open for a couple of months, what you might find is that wasn't placed in there because we didn't want to kind of assume how that might look for your practice. So what you'd be able to do is you'd be able to build an MTD service template. And I'll show you the steps on here as the default ones, so you can get a rough idea of what you might want to put in there as well. But on this page, I'll be enabling my MTD service. So I can now track that job for my client. I can include it as something on the schedule for a proposal document. I could just basically confirm what I offer that client and how much it's going to cost them as well. Now, this is not an exact science for everybody, but it's an idea of how you may want to look at pricing your MTD submissions as well. So in here, fee periods, we've got ours set by default to quarterly on this one to handle the quarterly submissions that you're going to be dealing with. We're working on the assumption you'll probably charge separately for the, the final submission, the self-assessment style submission at the end. But in here, you may want to incorporate those fees. You may want to have a larger quarterly fee to incorporate the final submission in. It'll purely depend on the practice and how you want to work there. But we've also kind of built out a few questions as a bit of a guide for how you may want to price these as well. So you may want to work through a few different pricing factors. So you may want to choose, what record type is your client working from? So you can pick from, typical bookkeeping providers, whether a spreadsheet, if it's just bags in a box, that style of thing. And you can build out different multipliers for each of these if you want to as well. So you can choose that. You can choose how the records look. Is it really good records? Is it really rubbish records? Choose an answer from there as well. And you can also choose different income sources. So, is it going to be just self-employment? Is it self-employment and rental? Is it self-employment, rental, and actually they've got lots of foreign properties that need their own separate filing basis done on there as well. So you can choose the number of income sources there to accommodate for how many submissions you're going to have to make. You can also factor in whether or not the client does their own bookkeeping. So it might be if you do the bookkeeping, you want to put an extra charge in that to save for, accommodate for the extra work that you do. But if a client does do their own bookkeeping and it's all still tidy, as we say here, you might want to lower that fee. That'll come out with a suggested value. You can either use that exact suggested fee, or you may want to, in some instances, if you see it's got like a £2 on the end, you may want to round it to a more sensible looking number on there as well, and just type in a selected fee on that right-hand side. So this could really be a friend with pricing, taking the time to build out these pricing factors, maybe using ones you've already got existing elsewhere and just repurposing them into the MTD service as well. And then the final bit, service details on here. If I just open this up, so the default ones in our system that we set up, we've got a request records, records received, prepare submission, upload to client portal, and obviously the filing of the submission as well. So we've based it loosely around the VAT one that's there. Now, practice by practice, you may want to add, you may want to take different steps from that. You want to fine tune that and make it relevant to how you guys are going to work on there. But something like that in there is a bit of a guide. It could be a good start point to work with on that one as well. You can set internal deadlines for these if you want to, but by default for MTD, it will be a set deadline on there for the service that's in. If you've got it by default, it will work to the 7th of the following month, a little bit like the VAT ones. So you'd be working to a statutory deadline that's in there. But in here, obviously, as you would with any other service, you can assign it out to your members. But the big helps with MTD are not going to come from these service steps. It's going to come from what you can build into the service. So within the service, you can build out auto reminders. So if I just move over and say yes to saving these changes, within MTD, now we've turned them off in our practice because we use our own email addresses. So that's the last thing I want to be sending to myself is a million reminders. But on this one, we've built out a few standard reminders. So I've got one that's like an initial, you've then passed your deadline, we're into the submission phase now, can you please bring in your records? If we've not received the records, so these can be conditional based. So if you're still in that records request, awaiting record state, you can send a further reminder to say, we've still not received your records, can you please bring them in? And you might want another one in there. You may want to build it into the service itself as a complimentary message once they've been received, thanks for bringing in your books, that sort of thing. But the big thing about these is they can work on a couple of different levels of automation. So you can have pure automation with these emails, so they can be generated and sent out to the client all at a set runtime based on the conditions of the job. Or you can have them just to create and you have the final stage of approval. So you can have them literally create the messages, and then under that automations heading, you can go to the message queue and you can approve messages either in batches or in individuals, basically making sure that you get the final say, sense check over which messages go out, just in case you've got something in that hadn't quite been marked as received yet, that sort of thing. But the final bit to note of these reminders is these are obviously built into the service by default. You can add more to the default settings. You can change it as you need to. You can make sure the wording is the way that you like it. But you can also add client-specific auto reminders. Now, with client-specific ones, you may want to do these on top of the default ones. So you might have sort of like 2 or 3 reminders as a one-size-fits-all. And if you've got clients that are particularly bad at bringing records in, you maybe want to add an extra couple of reminders on top for those clients specifically to give them the extra chase that they need. It might also be that you've got clients in the same way, just don't respond to your normal phrasing. So instead of using them on top, you maybe want to have client-specific ones that you will use instead of your standard reminders. So instead of encouraging people and saying, we would like to have your records in, it will help us to get the work done, you may want to rephrase it as you must bring your records in or you will potentially receive penalties from HMRC for late submission. So you may want to change the phrasing of that client by client if needed as well. So it could be a really good option there. The final option, which I've seen a few people doing, is if you wanted to send something out, so you might have clients in there in your client base that are not natively English speakers, what you could do is have your English reminders in there for default across the board. If you've got people that maybe wouldn't understand that, maybe wouldn't get the concept of how important it was, you could put something in their native language as a client-specific auto reminder, so it lands a lot better with them specifically as well. So really good options in there. And then the final bit I just want to showcase on here as well for anybody that hasn't used it previously, it's just the files section. So it'll just be a really simple case of, you know, if I was to take it in accounts, but this could be a taxation, it could be an MTD folder, it could be any folder you need it to be in here. But within there, upload file, simple drag and drop style process. So if you wanted to put your MTD submission information, that PDF document into here, save a copy of it from TaxCalc, drag and drop and just place it into your client portal on here. But additionally, if I wanted to request a signature on that, I can just hit that little request sign-in button. That'll go to the client side on their client portal, so they'll be able to approve and see all that and have access forevermore to that document as well. So they won't have to keep chasing you and asking you for copies of what it was. They can just go back and do it themselves. But those are the key bits I wanted to highlight, just, you know, sort of how it's going to be handled within TaxCalc, especially how that submission process can look, you know, the ways you can check over the submission statuses, the quarterly filing statuses on there. But just to touch on the engager piece, especially for those auto reminders, chasing clients in, you know, being able to do that without having the burden of typing out those messages yourselves is going to be a real game changer, especially for something like MTD where it's so new, it's so different. And I think everybody can be in agreement. As much as it is hitting the telly now and being advertised, there was a huge lack of understanding about the urgency of MTD and how it's going to impact so many people. So I think getting that message across clearly and quickly to clients is going to be an absolute winner on there. But I will just have a look through the chat. I'll see if there's any bits and pieces I can pick off and answer on there. So if I just have a look through, so Sam, on my one, when I did the pricing on that, I just assumed it was a quarterly basis. Now, depending on where you are, your clients you work with, that sort of thing, you may want to charge different prices ever so slightly. We've just put that in there as a bit of a guide to go through for something that looks sensible. I wouldn't want to say that is the exact price you should charge, but different people will be approaching that in different ways. The way we tried to do it was pricing for quarterly submissions and then pricing for an end of year submission separately on there. So I can see a couple more. Is the ability to use a client as a test basis and submit quarterly on a test basis? I suppose potentially. We don't have a dedicated test facility. We don't have sort of dummy UTRs or anything available directly via TaxCalc for the test submissions on there. So any submissions you do in theory would be live. You may be able to, if you can get details of dummy clients that you could set up initially from HMRC directly to a testing facility, it may work, but we don't have a dedicated test facility available in TaxCalc, especially for that one. So a good question on that one, Sally. It's a good point out. If I just open it up in TaxCalc, so finding clients that come within the criteria. So this will be really, really handy for anybody if you've been on TaxCalc previously, and especially looking in a year's time when that value rate changes. Within Practice Manager, everybody will have access to this as well. In Report Manager down in the bottom, there is a report in here that is MTD potential clients based on 2025 income. If I'm to run that report, we'll see if I've actually got my filters set up correctly on this one. Client selection. Okay, so at the moment, I don't have any clients with income above 50,000. If I was to change this though, so this is preset to identify clients with income, total qualifying income above 50,000. We will be adding another one in next year to chase up for clients above 30,000 as well. But if you wanted to check that in advance, you could take this existing report, go to the data mine and just change that from 50,000 to 30,000, hit run on that report. And I still don't have anybody in there. So it's always looking good for me. But it will give you a full list of your clients where their total qualifying income, so that is from self-employment, from rental properties, from foreign rental on there, where all them combined and accumulated would be above, in this case, 30,000 or 50,000 with the default settings. It'd be a case of finding this MTD potential clients report in the system on that report manager area. Can see on there from Maria is Engager app within TaxCalc. So it's all under the same company branch, but very close partners, still separate entities on separate products on there. So Engage Your App is not a default product within TaxCalc. It is something, if you wanted to see more of it, though, it can absolutely be arranged. Which brings me on to my next point, and there, if I go to a little poll section, I am just going to publish and add a poll for anybody still in the chat there. Just off the back of today's session, if there is any bits and pieces you'd like to hear more of, so if you would like to see a little bit more of Engage, if you'd like to see a bit more of a quarterly filer, if you'd like to see other areas that TaxCalc covers as well, feel free to add a vote into the poll and just point out those areas you'd like to hear more about. We'll be able to make sure that someone's in touch to kind of ask a bit more, see what you're interested in, and get all your details there as well, if it lets me publish that through. So I'll just add that in now. So that should be there and visible for everybody. So yeah, if you do want to answer into there for any poll answers, we'll be able to make sure we're in touch about the different areas. Just for a couple more questions. Anurada, will it have the final self-assessment built in? Yes, it will be in the tax return production module. It will not be in the MTD Quarterly Filer module. So for the final submissions, it will be done as usual in tax return production, a little bit like the normal self-assessment. It will just be a slightly different form that's going to be on there. Kathy, it'd be worth having a look, actually. I do believe any defaults should be saved within the Help Center for different services that are in there. So the default service templates, if they've not been put into your system by default, if you've been using Engage a little bit longer, be worth having a look in that Help Center. I do believe it should be in there. If not, I'll be able to check. Obviously, I had the different steps included on my recording there as well. But yeah, if you want to hear more on that, absolutely feel free to contact the guys that Engage support there as well, just to see what the default steps are if needed. So for Michael on that one, if the client uses zero as they go through and you're doing a final self-assessment style return on TaxCalc, the fetch function will pull all that information back from HMRC rather than pulling from elsewhere, specifically in TaxCalc or zero. So it's going to be pulling purely from the submission history from HMRC. So it doesn't matter which software you submit from, as long as those categories have been, assigned out and you've submitted to the separate categories as part of the submission process, we'll pull that information back and be able to pre-populate that into the new style return. Jonathan, on that one, the mapping is system-centric, not client-centric. So you can have that same one mapping and use it across every client. You don't have to have a separate mapping per client. Depreciation not allowed. So depreciation, be able to make sure it's disallowed. I was obviously doing a very rush through example on there, and getting as much of that as possible in there as well. So just checking the time, I appreciate we've got to the end of the session now. I know there's a few more questions in. What I will try and do is I will try and come back to these and pop any answers into there as I go for you guys as well. Try and get to as much as possible. But genuinely, absolute pleasure, everybody. Oh, good shout with the Excel templates. I'll pop that into the chat for everybody now. I did promise that one. So if everybody would like the Excel templates, they can be found on that page. Just be careful of the first couple. They're VAT templates at the top, MTD for VAT. The bottom ones will be your MTD for it. So you'll have the self-employment and a rental version on there as well. But genuinely, thank you so much for everybody. It was really nice to get everybody in. It was a nice big group today as well. Really nice and active chat. Hopefully that was helpful to see what TaxCalc and Engager can both offer, certainly separately and combined if you wanted to put the two together as well. Like I say, I will try and get back into the chat and some of the questions. I'll try and get back to some points as we go. But if there's anything you feel unanswered, do feel free to contact the support teams and get in touch and ask any questions there as well. Cheers, everybody. Thank you very much.